Hello, welcome to our YouTube channel. We are FARM Uganda. Here is Lawrence. He's going to be taking us through all the services we offer to our farmer. We redefine agribusiness. Don't touch the dial. Watch out on our services.
When we talk about irrigation system, we are simply talking about a reliable source of water. And in many cases, you may have a river, you may have a borehole somewhere, or whatever the source of water you got. Maybe you harvested the water. For example, in our case here, we have harvested the water from the roof of our offices. We put it into this small tank right here, but it is enough to serve our little farm needs. Then, after you have your clean water in the tank, well, clean because we do not want to pump in or bring in rubbish into our tank, then that water, you get what we call an outlet from the tank. Okay, if you go to the plumbing language, this is what we call a tank connector or a long screw. Then you have a control valve, because a time you will come when you need to do, maybe to service the water filter. So you will need to switch off that water so that doesn't bog you down as you try to clean the water filter. Now, after the control valve, we get the water filter. I have two filters connected in just right after each other. The main purpose is because I have in the nursery down there where we saw before, I have a system that pushes water through very tiny hole to pressurize it into a mist form. So I really don't want even a single particle of soil into that system, else it will just clog with a lot of mud within no time, because remember, the machine pushes it at a given pressure, so the dirt would clog in so badly. So this is the filtration that we are talking about, and the filtration doesn't necessarily have to be, the water filter doesn't have to be this small. We have different sizes to serve the need at hand. There are farms which we need maybe water filter of 3-inch, 4-inch, depending on the need and the amount of water that we need to filter. All that we can do it. Now we go and see how we connect the pipes once we get to the garden. How we connect the pipes, the drip lines from the main line to the garden. Thank you, and you're welcome back. Now, we were looking at water control from the tank into the garden. Remember, tanks and the water sources differ as per the need. And as such, here I'm just holding on a ball valve, a control valve. This mainly, we would use it to control water. Maybe section is irrigating in like 1 acre garden. So you use these to control water. Remember, you had your tank somewhere, okay? From the tank, you go through the water filtration. This is also a bigger water filtration, water filter. Now, from the water filter, now you would have now different control valves down the garden. Because remember, gardens can be many. You may be doing maybe coffee or something out there in the field, and you need to irrigate it. Now, when you're irrigating, it is important you have control valves. Now, after the control valves, it will depend now on what kind of crop are you watering. If you're dealing with the tree-like crops, that's when now you use what we call button drippers. The button drippers, these little button-like items, you fix them onto a pipe like this. This is just a 20 mm HDPE pipe. You fix them where you want it to pour water, and then it has an adjustable volume which you can use to adjust the amount of water that it pours per second. Now, these are different from the ones we use on vegetables. Remember, we are not talking about overhead water where you water on the leaves. We are talking about supplying water onto the roots of the plants that we are irrigating. Now, apart from that, now when you are coming from the main line, the drive line, where we were controlling with this, from the drive line to where we connect now the small pipes that run into the garden, we use what we call start connectors. For example, you have here an example of a pipe. This is a PVC pipe, 4-inch. You can also use it, no, this is 3-inch, that you can also use it in your garden. PVC because it's a little cheaper and it serves the purpose, especially if you can bury it into the soil. Now, from the PVC pipe that is carrying the volume of water, we drill a small hole onto it that we fix in what we call start connectors. Now, the start connectors, remember we had talked earlier that depending on how your land is, if the land is slanting and you cannot afford what we call self-compensating drip lines, you may have to use what we call global start valves. Now, the global start is where now it allows you at some point to switch off water in case maybe you may realize that down the land the plants are getting more water than the higher sides of the land. So you simply switch them off using these global start plugs. And then that means that line will not get that water at that particular moment in time. Now, the next time you needed to get water, you simply open the valve and the water flows into the garden. Now, we are going to look at a sample garden. Now, the drip irrigations, remember we talked about them and we said they are of different types. Now, this particular one here is showing what we call the button drips at work. Now, the button drip is adjustable. I can adjust the amount of water that comes out of each button. If I don't want more, I simply regulate and I only get very little out of that particular button. This is best for people who are doing katunda, people who are doing trees of different types, the pawpaws, the avocado, the macadamia. This is the perfect system to irrigate their garden. Remember, you just use a plain pipe like this and you only perforate where you are going to put your button, and your button will drip water only at that particular point. So you don't lose water pouring everywhere. You got to preserve water, remember? Stay tuned. You are welcome. Now we are still looking on the drip irrigation and we have just looked at the button drip. Now we have the drip irrigation using tape drips. The tape drips, remember, they come with pre-perforated micro sprinklers or pre-perforated holes that emit water at a given distance. In this particular garden you see here, I'm using a drip irrigation system that has a 30 centimeter spacing dripping. Now, when I release here, the water goes into the garden and feeds all these carrots that you can see here. And you can imagine all this is in open field and growing very healthy. And soon we are going to expect carrots from this. And all that is using very little water that is supplied by the drip irrigation. You can see our drip line. This is how it supplies the water, little by little. It has a spacing of 30 centimeters. You can see now another emitter there. And you can see our carrots are doing quite well. You can see them down here. Yeah, we have hope now, all because of the irrigation system. That's how the drip irrigation supplies water into the garden. Here we are looking at growing plants on water, what we call a hydroponic system. These are plants that are growing purely on water. There is no soil. We just use these very little cups, the disposable cups. What happens is you are in a wedding, you are in a ceremony, people have drunk the water, they have drunk the wine, and they have thrown away the cups. For us, we use them. Then we also use the styrofoam. Styrofoam is mainly the things that normally come in TVs and electronics, wrapping them to prevent them from breaking. We also use those. Remember, those are things that people just throw away. For us, we use them. We put them just to help hold our plant into the cup, and then you just put it in the water, and that plant will grow. We are going to see later on some mature plants, some strawberry plants, and some other plants. Now, in this particular kind of an arrangement, we are using what we call a PVC pipe, the drainage pipes, which we normally use in our houses or in drainage systems. This is a 4-inch pipe. We simply put an end cap on this side and the other side to help create sort of a room that can contain water. Now, this water that we put in here, we put it in a cycle. It is always in motion. That is, if you can afford it, it is a very good thing. It's always in motion. And to supply that water, we use a pump, a small pump. Actually, using solar, we use a small pump that we run to release water into the pipes. And in this water, that's where the plant will grow in all its days. Now, for the plant to grow, it needs a number of things. One, it will need what we would call food. And food for the plants is simply nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and a few what we call macro elements, or in simple language, some few metals. Now, we supply those metals manually because the water doesn't have enough nutrients to make these plants grow as we would wish them to. So we apply something like an NPK. That is what we call soluble NPKs. And the soluble NPK normally comes with what we call plus TE, the trace element. Those are the metals that are needed by the plant. And there is the proportions into which we put in. So it's not just a matter of bringing the NPK and pouring inside. No. There is regulation, and we have to look at the number of plants and the area that they are growing in, then to determine how much of it is required. However, these plants stay here for about 30 to 45 days, and in that period they have grown enough for us to eat. In this particular case where we are, our canopy up here is a little bit dark, so we don't have enough sunlight, and for that reason we have brought in what we call grow lights. The grow lights help us to supply UV lights, sort of imitating what the sun does to crops to grow. And when you supply that, the crops will flourish. Now, this is what we call lettuce. We have different types of lettuce, but this particular one is the flowery type of lettuce, which you just eat the leaves. It doesn't form a cabbage. Not because we wouldn't want the cabbage, but remember, a cabbage is heavier than the leaves. Now, given the types of cups that we are using, they are small in size, and as such, if we have too much wind, these cups may fall off. But we are going to see later a different technique into which we can use to plant that is more firm, that you can be able to plant any other type of crop that you can be able to, that you may want to plant, and it will grow. Remember, when you are growing crops in a hydroponic, there are several things that you need to put into consideration. One, the water needs to be in flow to prevent it from sitting. When it stagnates, it develops certain fungi that make the roots to rot. So that's why we encourage the water to always be in motion, or at least once in a week change that water, put in new water if you cannot afford a pumping system. Now, the other thing is the plants will need food. There are different sources of food. If you have say things like rabbit, you can be able to supply them with the rabbit urine. You spray them or you feed them direct. You can also use now the artificial fertilizers. There are also people who make their own fertilizers using plant debris and such and cuttings, and you can be able to make your own fertilizer that you can use to feed your hydroponic. And the other thing is we need water. We need water, and the water should not be, hot water. It should be room temperature basically for proper growing of crops. The other thing you need to do is to make sure that you don't get any insects, and in that case we use simple mechanisms where we use insect traps. These insect traps help us to catch any insect that may come flying, planning to eat on our crops. Remember, we are also trying to survive. They are also trying to survive, but in this case we don't want to use chemicals, because in this particular case we are planting things that we use for salads, and in many cases they are very hard to really properly clean them. So when we use the insect trap, any insect that comes by, it gets stuck on the trap. It's attracted by the color and gets stuck on the trap, and that's the end of it. So no need of using chemicals. Thank you. Let's look at the other type of hydroponic that you can be able to do. A simple hydroponic, which you can be able to use even on your veranda or canopy somewhere, or even in your house. But if you are going to grow in your house, it is important to remember that you'll need a UV bulb, or what we were calling the grow light. The UV bulb will help you to have or to imitate the sunlight that provides UV rays. Remember, the sun is what the plants use to make food in a process called photosynthesis. Now, in this particular case, if you are in a shade or in a house, you may need these bulbs so that the plants can be able to make their own food. Let's go and look at a different type of hydroponic, which doesn't necessarily have this pumping system, and we see how it fares. These are Chinese cabbages growing in water, strictly water. Now, these are simple pipe, which you can even carry away, Oh, yeah. It's just a pipe full of water, no soil, and the plants are growing healthy. Now, if you look at this plant, it has been here just for a month, and you can see how big it is. The main thing is we just feed it with water every day, because these plants mainly, it's 90% water, so you just have to feed it with water every day, and you can see how healthy they are growing up to this level. And this is strictly 1 month after we transplanted. Now, okay, of course I have also the other pipe behind it. It's also the same plant, and it's doing quite well. Behind it here we have the strawberries. Now, on the strawberries we have put what we call vermiculite. Now, these are stones, but they do not have any food for the plant to eat. It's simply stones. And now these stones, they are right type of stones. They are very light. You can see them, very light. Now, in those stones we just put water, and then of course this water we put in the minerals or the food that the plants need, and that's where we are growing our strawberry. Very healthy. We had harvested earlier today, and you can see some of them here. Very healthy strawberries growing on water, purely water, nothing else. This is just water. This is what we call hydroponic, growing plants on water. Here we have a bit of mature lettuce growing on water, and as you can see, in this particular case we have used the vermiculite again just to hold the plant into the cup, and then below it is simply water, nothing else, just water, and you eat like that. And this is just on our veranda here. And the vegetables, these ones are 2.5 weeks. Yes, 2.5 weeks now, and in a month's time we shall start eating them. Thank you. When we are talking of plastic mulching, or using what we call the mulching paper, we are simply talking about covering the ground where the plants grow in or grow on, such that you end up with the plants growing and the plastic sheeting, or what we call the plastic mulching, covering the ground where they are seated on or where they are rooted into. Now, this small garden here is a simple demonstration of an irrigation and mulching paper covering the garden. Now you have the irrigation watering the plants into the roots, and then you have the mulching paper covering the garden where the plants are seated on. Now the importance of mulching are as follows. One, it helps to keep the moisture in the soil and it is not evaporated into or by the heat of the day or the sun of the day. And remember, mulching can be done in the greenhouse or even in the open field. Now this mulching paper, that's the number one purpose of the mulching paper. Number two is to keep the garden clean. One, when you mulch the garden, there is no more weeding. I mean, there is no weed you're seeing growing around because the ground is covered. So there is no more weeding. And if you don't have weeding, especially if you're dealing in commercial farming, weeding, you end up spoiling the plants, you end up breaking. For example, if you have fruits growing, you break the fruits. If it's greens like this, you end up breaking the leaves as you're trying to weed and to reach out into the other corner. In this particular case, there is no weeding. The third advantage is that it helps in regulating especially fungal diseases, especially when it is raining a lot. We have a lot of water stagnating or a lot of water going into the soil, but when you have the mulching papers installed, you do not have that. The garden drains easily, and as such you do not have issues to do with fungal accumulation in the garden, which may result into bringing fungal infections onto the plants, and of course that will lead into losses because you have to buy chemicals to try and control the diseases and all that. So mulching paper helps also in that. Now we also have they give us the advantage that the mulching paper itself reflects the light up. In its reflecting the light up, the insects which like humbling or hiding under the leaves, they become very uncomfortable under there because there is too much light from up and also being reflected back to them from the mulching paper. Now, thus the insect will opt to look for a different garden apart from this particular one, because this one is not encouraging them to hide and eat comfortably. Then also on the issue of the insect, because the insect have to finish their life cycle in the soil, here we do not have open soil, so the insect's life cycle is cut short. And if you cut short the life cycle of an insect, that means you'll end up with less insect in the next season or even in the growth period that you have the crop that you have. The other fifth advantage is that when you do spray, maybe you are controlling insects, for example, if an insect falls down when you are spraying, it has nowhere to hide. It is still in the open. And remember, when you are doing spraying or what we call pest control, the spray is normally in a mist form. That mist eventually also ends up on the mulching paper. And the chemicals that you use to do pest control, they have something we call an emulsifier, something that helps the chemical spread onto the leaves of the plant. And also when it falls on to the mulching paper, it also spreads evenly, covering the entire of the mulching paper, hence killing whatever insect that had dropped into the soil. Those are the importances of a mulching paper. Now, mulching paper, you install it after preparing the garden. You dig the garden, you put in the manure that you're putting in. If you are adding any artificial fertilizer like farming lime or DAP, that is diammonium phosphate, after tilling the garden properly and making your farming ranges, then you put the irrigation system, then you cover with the mulching paper, then you go cutting small holes like you can see here, small holes where you plant your seedling. Remember, the seedling comes sort of a finger-sized plant. It's a small plant. So you put it in that little hole and it will grow from there to whatever size it becomes. Now, after the crop has reached its maturity. If it's a cabbage, you'll cut. If it's a tomato, you'll have harvested and uprooted. If it's a vegetable like this, you harvest for about a year. And the mulching paper, remember, mulching paper is a farming paper, specially made for farming. It's not just any cavera or any paper that you buy out there. It's specially made for farming, so it can withstand weather. And as such, at the end of the crop life, you simply roll up your mulching paper, take it maybe into your cleaning place or into your store, clean it up and store it safely and wait to use it in the next planting that you're going to do. So that is how important a mulching paper is into our farming. And because you can be able to reuse it, it becomes even environmentally friendly.
Now,
Thank you. We are looking at solar dryers. This is the other service that we give to the community. Solar dryers vary in size and purpose. We have solar dryers for drying coffee. We make coffee dryers. They vary in size because there are some people who have different big farms who want to dry their coffee. Some of them want to dry the berries. Others want to dry the beans. Now, the dryers are made as per the need. Here we have a small example of a dryer. This, to start with, this is the material that we use for making the dryer. This is a UV paper, specially made for making dryers. It is not affected by weather, and as such, even after installing it, I don't expect it to take less than 3 years out there in the hot sun drying your commodities. And this is a simple dryer here, small dryer for home use. It's a 1 meter by half a meter, so you can comfortably say it's half a square meter. It is simple in that it has the door there that you can be able to use to access the tray. Then the tray onto which you put in your drying commodities. This tray, we have made it using, of course, timber. Timber is friendly. And then we use a net that is, we call them a food grade net. Remember we said different dryers, we make different dryers for different purposes. This is for drying things like fruits, mushrooms, home use, tomatoes, carrots, general fruits. It will do it, vegetables, it will do it comfortably. And this net here, it does not get degraded by the sunlight or even the heat. And remember, these dryers can heat up to 70 degrees. If it is left in the hot sun, it can heat up to 70 degrees, hence drying whatever has been put inside. For example, if you chipped cassava and put it here on a hot day, give it about 1 hour and it is dry, and you can even grind it after that. Now, that's how efficient that dryer is. And this is a simple dryer that one can even use for home use. It's portable. You can be able to move it to wherever you want. You can see it's something light that you can be able to move it to wherever you want, and then you can be able to dry your commodities. The other dryers that we do make are dryers for drying cereals, for cereal farmers. We have for drying beans, for drying maize, for drying simsim and the like. There are quite many that we make, and we have made so many. We have dryers for drying animal feeds. Animal feeds, because things like goats, rabbits, they don't need to eat very wet leaves or feeds, so we dry them. We have dryers for drying timber. For timber processing companies, they need where they can be able to dry their timber, where it doesn't, the timber dries at a given temperature. So we build them in a way that the temperature does not exceed a certain level, or does not get to, does not allow a wetness of a certain level. Then we have dryers for drying animal wastes, say for example cow dung. We have dryers for drying chicken droppings, especially from caged birds. Caged birds, these are birds that we farm in cages, and Kalimbwe becomes a big problem for the farmers. We make dryers of different sizes depending on the number of birds that one has. If you have, say, 3,000 birds, which I'll tell you we make a dryer of about 50 to 80 square meters. Depending on the number of birds, we make a dryer that serves that purpose. We also have dryers for drying school chalk. Because we have so many cottage industries, we have people who are making chalks in their backyard. We also have schools now that are making their own chalk. We have dryers that help dry those chalk in a temperature that they do not break, but they dry so evenly and quickly. We also have dryers for drying briquettes. We have people who are making briquettes. We do make dryers for drying those briquettes. We also do have dryers for drying things like fish, especially for commercial use. We have like silverfish. We have made dryers that dry those ones. We have also made dryers that dry certain juices to make them to make what we call the concentrates, like a powder form of a concentrate. So we have all those dryers and more. And then here in front of me I have a tape. This is not a cello tape. This is what we call a UV tape. It's the same material as the one we use in the dryer, such that in case your dryer has a small hole somewhere, you do not have to worry, oh, my top has been cut a little bit, now the water will leak inside. You do not have to worry. We can simply fix that using this tape, and this tape is not affected by weather either, and it will stick there until maybe the project is written off, or maybe you need to increase the project size, or whatever else that needs to be done. That is for the dryers. Now, the other thing that we do is we do water harvesting. Water harvesting is where you get rainwater and you want to put it into either a tank. A tank can be made of different materials. There are some which are made of galvanized sheets. There are others that are made of plastic. We also make tanks using dam liners, or what we call pod liners. These liners come in different gauges. This is a 1 millimeter pod liner. We have others which are smaller than that. We have 0.5, we have 0.3 millimeters, but there are also others which are a little bit bigger than this. So depending on the need at hand, we use those liners. Now you can also make a dam, for example, a valley dam, and because there are some soils which are quite permeable, you know, you harvest water, yes, and even before the rain goes, all the water that you had harvested, it's all drained into the soil. So we come and we install such a lining into your garden, into your pod, and thereby storing your water there until you can be able to use it. It's the same liners that we also use to make tanks, which you can simply make using wood or even metal. You make those boxes, and then you put in the lining, and it acts as a tank that you can use for water harvesting. Now the sizes depend on what you, the farmer, want to do. Because, for example, if it is for cows, you may need to know the number of heads that you have, and then the amount of water that you expect to use, and it is that volume that we create. Then we also have farmers who pump water maybe from down the river. You are pushing it up the hill, and you just dig a pond, and then you put it in there for use downhill again for farming. This is the perfect solution for that. Use pod liners, or what we call dam liners. They will help you to keep your water safe, and this is a material that has over 36 years of use without going nowhere. It's weatherproof. As long as you don't have animals stepping inside, we guarantee you that this material doesn't get spoiled. That aside, we do consultation services. Farmers come and consult with us, sometimes on what they would want to grow or the investment that they would want to invest into. We have, for example, farmers who want to farm vegetables. You can come to us and consult with us. We shall guide you, we shall work with you until you're able to get to the market. We are also consult with people who are looking at what can they grow in their land. Some people don't even have an idea on what to grow on their land, but you come to us, we get to your garden, and we can be able to guide you onto what you can grow on your garden. We also have institutions that come to consult with us and to inquire on different farming ventures that they can do. We have institutions, we have churches, we have schools, we have tertiary institutions that do come, and we help and we guide them onto farming issues. Then we also have training that we conduct. We have some simple trainings that we conduct here at office. It can be a day's training, it can be a 1 hour training, it can be a week's training, or even a number of months training, depending on what one wants to do. For example, you have your farm, and maybe the person you want to make your farm manager is not quite knowledgeable on the farming matters. You send that person to us, we train him, and after 3 months, the person comes back to your garden full of practical knowledge, and then he can be able to push your farm or your garden forward. We also have young students. They have just graduated from school, or they are just there at home doing nothing, wasting off. Send them to us and we can train them on simple farming skills, and they can be able to make a livelihood out of it. We also have open field horticultural training, where we come to your garden, or on farm training, we come to your garden and we train your staff, because in many cases you have your staff. Remember, your staff are the people who interact with the crops and the plants daily. We come there, we train them, we teach them how to identify diseases, how to fight diseases, how to do pest management, how to control say weeds, how to do different tasks at farm. And we can do it like a module level, where we say today we want to deal with insects only. Then we deal with that and we train your staff on that. If we are dealing with diseases, we also do that. If we are dealing with maybe crop care, general crop care, we train them on that. If we are dealing with post-harvest handling, we also train them on that. And thereby you later realize that your farm productivity is as good as the knowledge that your workers have. If it is to prosper, if it is to grow, you definitely need to grow your human resource that you have. We are at Task Farm Uganda. You are welcome to visit us. You can pay us a visit in our offices. We are in Lubaga, Kabusu, just by the Kabusu roundabout. If you're coming from town, you drive along Kabusu Road. Just before you get to the roundabout, you'll see our Task Farm signpost on your left-hand side, and then you slope down, you'll find us down there. Check us also on the YouTube at Task Farm. Check us on Facebook. We are at taskfarm.ug. We are also on website. You can check us on www.taskit.ug/Task Farm. We are here to serve you.